from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I hope you are doing very, very well today. I'd like to take this opportunity, if I may, to address a viewer question which I received about a month or so back. And this one is from it's a very interesting question from Weil Kyrie, Weil Kyrie. I hope I got the pronunciation correct. So I hope you're doing very well, my friend, and thank you very much for your comments and your work and your enthusiasm about film in general. It's really quite wonderful. And again, please let me know if I mispronounced your name, and I'll be sure to correct it. But you asked a very interesting question, and I remember that you were talking about it, I think, in the context of the film The Vanishing, which is in the Criterion Collection. And you asked me, what are some of the scary films or the films that I found frightening or scary that are in the Criterion Collection? And I thought, oh, this is a very interesting question. I think I've addressed this question somewhat before in the context of, let's say, horror films or scary films. But what I thought I'd do today is maybe address the question in the context of the Criterion Collection. But this time, I'd like to try to talk about films that are not necessarily marketed as scary films or horror films per se, but they are films that I think scare me or frighten me or have an effect that chills me. And I think they're not necessarily horror films, and I think most of them are films that I haven't spoken about at great length on this channel yet. So this might be a nice opportunity for me to begin to talk about other films in the Criterion Collection with respect to which I haven't spoken so far on this channel. So those are the general parameters about how I might answer the question. And the films I'm about to mention, of course, don't represent all of the works in the Criterion Collection that I think are scary or frightening, but they are just a small sampling. You can always agree or disagree, or you can, of course, please feel free at any time to add any other suggestions that you think are apt in answering the question in a way that you think is appropriate. Any titles you think that are not, I haven't mentioned, that you think are worth mentioning, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below, and I'd love to hear about them. And I'm going to also say that I'm going to interpret the word scary or frightening, those words, I'm going to interpret them liberally and broadly. So they're not necessarily in the context of, say, a horror film or genre film context, but rather on a broader scale. And so this can be a very liberal interpretation of these words. So with that in mind, my friends, let me just share with you a few examples of films in the Criterion Collection that I think in their own unique or respective ways are frightening or scary. Okay, this is in no particular order, but let me begin with Spy Number 230. This is from 1977, directed by Robert Altman, and it's this film, which is Three Women. Three Women is a very peculiar film. In many respects, it's quite an odd film, and at the same time, it is very disturbing, very frightening, and it acts on a level of disturbing and frightening. It acts in that way with in very simple terms, and it succeeds so much based on what seems to be a relatively simple premise, which is essentially this examination between these women, in particular the women who are played by Shelley Duvall and Sissy Spacek, and the the development of the relationship between these women, which takes certain surprising turns that can be described as being truly frightening and quite surprising, somewhat devilish and conniving even, but they never lose their edge in terms of an effect on the viewer. That is me when I watch the film. This is a very chilling work, a disturbing work, and quite odd and very creative in many respects. And so this film, Three Women by Robert Altman from 1977, is an example of a film that I think is, yes, it is scary. It is scary in the sense of in terms of obsession, in terms of how far some characters will go, in terms of achieving their goals, which might be described as being quite obsessive indeed. And so we have here a very peculiar, unique, and troubling character study of a very artistic bent, and it is along the way quite chilling indeed. And so I would say Three Women is one example of a film in the Criterion Collection that I think is scary or frightening. Next, this is spine number 142, and this is from 1977. This is the DVD of Peter Weir's directed film called The Last Wave. The Last Wave. This is with Richard Chamberlain. And the film, The Last Wave, it's not a horror film per se. It is not a science fiction or thriller film per se, but there are elements that are mysterious. There are elements that are actually quite disturbing. Visually speaking, there are motifs that strike a discordant note that enters the realm of being disturbing, at least from my point of view. And I think that's a great thing. It has an artistic, how should I put it? It has a way of capturing your attention with very vivid imagery and soundscapes and certain noises and images and colors that has that all have a very brutal and deeply disturbing edge to them. I don't know, and that edge enters the realm of a kind of dread, an apocalyptic dread that seeps into all of the pores of this film, if you know what I mean. So it has a nice momentum that leads to certain parts of the plot and narrative. And when you get deeper and deeper into it, you realize that the world is becoming much more dangerous and frightening. And so there is this underlying sense of dread that I think gives this film a frightening edge. And so from 1977, Peter Weir, The Last Wave, this is a film that I think is genuinely frightening, disturbing, and very, very effective. So that's another example here. So The Last Wave. Next, spine number 862 from 1976. I'm not sure if I've spoken about this film before. I think I have briefly, but it's worth mentioning again. Canoa, A Shameful Memory. Canoa, A Shameful Memory. This is a film from 1976, Mexico, and this was a film that I saw for the first time when it was released by the Criterion Collection, maybe a year or so ago. And now this is spine number 862, so it's a relatively recent release. This film stunned me. This film shook me at my very core, and it deeply, deeply disturbed me. It scared me, and it left me feeling very unpleasant, feeling quite disturbed, and very really scared at the images that I had seen in this film. It is a very intense work. It is a work that is clever in terms of its visual, cinematic strategy, and it has a real intelligence at its core, and it knows how to build tension, and it knows how to build suspense, and it does so in a way that's like a powder keg, and it just builds and builds and builds until suddenly it explodes. And oh boy, when it explodes, it really explodes, and this vicious debris that's left in the wake is a viewing experience that I shall never forget. And if you haven't seen the film, please be warned, because it is quite intense, a very intense film, but it is really unforgettable, and in many ways it can be said to be a landmark film, and in many ways it can be said to be quite an important film. But in terms of an immediate impact on me, the viewer, oh yes, this is a frightening work and a scary work, and one that is filled with a deeply brutal power that I think is long-lasting. And so, again, if you are okay with intense works, then I have no trouble recommending the film Canoa, A Shameful Memory. But please be warned, because it is very intense. So if that is not okay with you, then you probably are best to not watch this film. But in any event, in talking about a list of films that are scary or frightening or disturbing, Canoa, A Shameful Memory is indeed one of those. So, Canoa, A Shameful Memory. Next, Spine number 132. This is a DVD, and it's an early one. This is from 1972, and Peter Medak is the director, starring Peter O'Toole. The Ruling Class. The Ruling Class. This is one of my favorite films in the Criterion Collection, and it's one of my favorite films for many reasons. I think not one of those reasons being the incredibly dynamic performance of Peter O'Toole. This could be one of the best Peter O'Toole performances ever, and I think that's saying something, because Peter O'Toole, of course, has this really acclaimed career. This film, however, gives us a real 1-2 punch. 1-2 in the sense you have, on the one hand, a really biting, sharp, satirical comedy. But on the other hand, which is the 2 of the 1-2 punch, you have something that is genuinely frightening, truly scary, something that is perhaps even bordering on horror, just gripping, terrifying horror. There is a particular moment in this film, and again, I'm just trying to be as vague as possible, but there is a particular moment in this film where Peter O'Toole does something, and there's a camera flourish, and he just does something. And again, I'm sorry to be vague, because I think it's worth watching if you haven't seen it. Again, it's a pretty intense work, but if you are okay with that, then I would strongly recommend watching this film. But he does something in his performance that, to this day, I can't shake from my mind. It could be one of the the most frightening 10 seconds that I've seen in any film in the Criterion Collection. It is a moment that is just chilling. And it's combined with other moments in this film that are just laugh out loud funny. I mean, there are moments of dialogue here that are just, you can't stop laughing. It is a wonderfully, delightfully strange mixture of these seemingly polar opposites. Really laugh out loud comedy combined with these genuinely frightening moments. And it's mixed in this very strange brew that I think ultimately is one that might not suit everyone's tastes. I grant you that. But it does provide a unique viewing experience, to say the least. And it does give a lot of food for thought. Oh boy, a lot of food for thought. About the absurdity of certain aspects of the class system, and not just the absurdity, but the real dangers, perhaps, within certain democratic structures that are in place. But I think more immediately, there are just some genuinely frightening moments in this film, and it's made all the more fascinating by the fact that this film is a mixture of different genres, centered, of course, by the supremely brilliant performance of Peter O'Toole. So this is The Ruling Glass. Next is a DVD, Spine number 284, and this is from 1957. This is a filmmaker that I haven't spoken about on this channel yet. I really want to. He has a very large filmography, of which I would say only a small handful appear in the Criterion Collection. But that handful of films is a remarkable set of films. And included in that set of films is what's known as the box set called the 3 War Films. This is Andrzej Wajda. So Andrzej Wajda, and from Poland. And the box set here is a DVD box set. So there are 3 films in this set. They form a loose trilogy, if you will. There's a film called A Generation, there's a film called Kanal, and there's a film called Ashes and Diamonds. They are all truly brilliant. Truly brilliant. If you haven't seen a Wajda film, you really should. And I think there's no better place to start than the films that comprise this 3 War Films box set from Criterion. But if I were to talk about a film that I would say is frightening or chilling, I would choose from the set the film Kanal. Kanal from 1957. This is Spine number 284. This is a film that, once you've seen it, it will never leave you. It still haunts me, and it's a film that is relentless, and it is shocking, it is brutal, and it is bound by the inevitability of history. And the history that it's referring to specifically is the Warsaw Uprising. And so if you know your history, you will have a sense of how this film will play out. So there's the inevitability of history that is pulling you through to the very end. This, therefore, has a very dark edge to this world. So make no mistake about it. This is a very tough film and a very intense work, quite suspenseful and very bleak, but it is a true masterwork. and very disturbing. There are some aspects of this film that I still am just really disturbed by. It's not a kind of gotcha, surprise, disturbing quality. No, it's something that is more fundamentally deep-rooted, and it's one that is it leaves a kind of it leaves you cold, and it leaves you feeling bereft of any hope, perhaps. But all in all, it is a film that shows a kind of brutality and a finality and a sense of inevitable doom, perhaps that's too strong. But the notion that I want to get across is this film has some genuinely scary moments, genuinely frightening moments, and the scary moments and the frightening moments, I guess I said before, are propelled further by the fact that this is inextricably linked to this notion of the inevitability of the history that it's portraying. And when I try to wrap my head around that aspect of the film, it makes the film all the more frightening. And my goodness, it's a true masterwork for that reason alone. So Kanal, 1957's Kanal. This is again from the 3 war film set. It's a very tough watch, but if you are okay with intense works, I would strongly recommend watching Kanal. And in fact, that goes to all of the films in this set: A Generation, Kanal, and then Ashes and Diamonds. Cebulski on the cover here. So, yes, so Kanal, as part of the 3 war films box set from Criterion. Okay, my friends, let me just end it there. And again, what I had to say is just a small sampling of what I felt were films that were frightening or scary. Again, those words I have interpreted rather liberally. So if you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to leave them below. I'd love to hear what you have to think. And if you have any other films that you might think are scary or frightening, please feel free to leave them below. I would love to hear your ideas. As always, I am deeply impressed and moved by the activity that I see in the comments section. So you are all always teaching me something new, and so I look forward to talking with all of you about your ideas of sort of these genuinely frightening films in the Criterion Collection. And I think this whole notion of fright and scares, I think, as I said, I've interpreted it liberally, because I really feel it goes towards this idea of being moved, right? Being moved in some emotional way. Because we can be moved in many ways. We can be moved in a way that's considered positive, you know, in terms of happiness and love, but we can be moved in different ways as well. In ways that disturb us, in ways that teach us something, or in ways that scare us, so that we might try to, let's say, learn something about ourselves or about the world around us. So I think in that sense, I think these sorts of films, while again not necessarily for everyone, they do have the potential, at the very least, of making some kind of impact, or creating some kind of discussion, or creating some kind of insight that could have some potential impact on one's life and one's outlook on the world. So in that sense, I think this discussion is really interesting. And so I thank you very much for the question, Carrie. Kyrie. And so please, my thanks to you for the great question, and I hope you're doing well, my friend. And for the rest of you, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. And so thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you again very soon. Until then, my friends, cheers.